Hey, and welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We're here with Stephen Howard, who is going to be talking to us about Humony leadership and what that means and all these other connected things to it like emotional intelligence. And Stephen is an award-winning author of 22 business, leadership, and professional development books. He is all about mindfulness and being a wonderful person. And this word humany we're going to unpack is a word that Stephen created, which comprises humanity, and harmony to emphasize the leading of people and the need for leaders to create workplaces of well-being and harmony. So exciting stuff. I'm energized. I'm psyched up. Stephen, glad to be talking to you.
Oh, I'm glad to be with you, Robert.
Yeah, and so you're a man of all these big ideas and books, and you're a speaker, and you do all this kind of business leadership sort of stuff. And so what is your big idea these days? What's your passion, your focus?
Well, Humony is my passion, my focus, and you just elaborated on it very well. It's a word as you said, I created, and I'm getting a lot of good relevance and resonating with people. One of the things I talk about in the book is the need for harmony in the workplace, and people scoff at me. They laugh when I say, "Hey, what kind of harmony do you have in your workplace?" And they say, "There's no such thing." But I think we can get there. So that's my passion right now.
And what does harmony in the workplace look like when it's there? And what does things look like when the harmony is not there?
When it's not there, it looks like today, quite frankly, a lot of drama, a lot of conflict, people bringing their troubles into the workplace, snapping at each other. I think when it's there, the best way to describe it, and I'm sure you've been in that situation at some point, Robert, when you're in what's called flow. Everything's going, you got your head down, you're working on a task, you lose track of time, the creative juices are going, the brain's engaged. I think that's what harmony in the workplace is, only it's spread across multiple people. They're cooperating, they're collaborating, they're bouncing ideas off of each other, they're building on each other's ideas. So to me, that's really part of what harmony in the workplace looks like.
And the word picture in my mind, the sort of metaphor is pulling the rope in the same direction, because you're making me think back to different, business partners or teams or workplaces I've been in. And we've all been in that situation where our coworkers are like actively fighting against us. And we say, well, I can't do that because they'll do this. And it's this whole chess game. And then at some point, you can't even get much of anything done. You're so busy just fighting the other person. And then there's also the trap of maybe not so much pulling in opposite directions, but the other person is an obstacle, or they're slowing you down, and you say, well, I can't do this because I'm waiting on them to do that. And once they do that, then I can get this done real quick, but then I'm waiting on them again. And then you make me think about those sort of few moments in my life and sort of career paths where I'm excited to jump into something. And if I'm having kind of a slow point, or I'm stuck or whatever, I just have one conversation with someone who's kind of involved in this, and I'm like excited and ready to go. And so how do we get there? Is it a matter of removing the bad apples or learning better habits, or how do we achieve this harmony, this humany?
I think I love your analogy, by the way. I sort of thought of a tug of war with the water in the middle as you were talking there. I think the best way, it's a mindset change. I think leaders have to change their mindset that they don't manage people. Managing people is a 1980s construct. It's not applicable today. It's not relevant today. I mean, nobody wakes up and says, I can't wait to be managed by my boss today. And certainly no one, goes to the office or the workplace and says, I can't wait to be micromanaged by my boss today. So we got to get away. I mean, we have to understand that when we're in a leadership position, we're leading people. We manage things. We manage processes, policies, procedures, but we lead people. And that's the way we're going to get to harmony. People, if you're managing your people, then you're going to have disharmony in the workplace.
So you're saying manage the processes, but then lead people. And so just to make sure I'm kind of digesting and understanding, when I think of if I'm managing something, I kind of set the parameters, give an example, and I say go, and then I check on it later. And that seems like a recipe for getting tired, kind of always checking on it, versus with this whole, what comes to mind when you're talking about leading people is there are always problems to be solved. And you hear a lot of this about how if you give someone a task or put someone off on solving some problem, and then when they get stuck, make them not depend on you, right? Like help in and have that meeting, but then give them the freedom to solve their own problem. That the way they're not having to like run back at you if one little thing goes wrong. And so am I on the right track there when we're talking about leading instead of managing?
You're absolutely on the right track, Robert. And part of that, the only thing I would add to that maybe is when you're delegating or assigning a task is show them what success looks like. Let them know what the vision is. What is it we're trying to accomplish here and why? People need to know the why. I think when people come to you and they have the problem, what you're describing is absolutely correct, is that we want to mentor them. Don't just give them the answer. Say, well, what do you think? What have you evaluated? What are your options? Why don't you take a couple hours and come back to me and tell me what the 3 best options you have, and let's discuss that. In some ways, like being a parent, if I'm your child and I come to you and I say, Daddy, what's 6 times 7? You could turn around and tell me the answer, or you could pause and get out some coins and buttons or something, or the multiplication table, and show me how to figure it out. Because if you don't, I'm going to come back to you 30 minutes later. Daddy, what's 9 times 8? So you're absolutely right. Part of this is leadership is mentoring people, coaching them, helping them gain confidence in their decision-making capabilities.
So you're saying instead of the quick fix, which is faster in the present, go for more of the, I don't know if painful is the right term, but go for more of the long-term solution where it might be frustrating for now getting out the buttons and doing the counting, but then that sets them up for success in the future. And I even love the kind of suggestion there about you say, well, here's this problem. Instead of the solution, say, can you go and research it and then come back to me with 3 possibilities? So you're kind of just making some progress as far as getting the problem solved and not being in like an urgent panicky mode and not sweating the small stuff. And so this whole kind of mindset shift that you're talking about, I don't know. I don't like the person I was like, say, 5 or 10 years ago, as far as the mindset that I was in. And a lot of it was like the negativity that always like crept in. Like, we talk about like toxic workplaces, and it's really easy to make little comments or talk about gossip and then just sort of spread this. And it didn't really click with me until my son was born a few years ago, to just like be a better person and to kind of like unlearn the habits, because it is easy, it is tempting to say, oh, I'm not being negative, I'm not dishing out insults, I'm just doing the little itty bitty gossip. But then it's just, your brain just always works that way, and it's not a fun place to be. And so have you come across anything similar to that as far as just like your own transformation in your thinking?
Oh, I wish I'd written this book before I became a leader, or I wish I'd read this book, because you're absolutely right. It's so easy to be cynical. And one thing, so here's something people don't understand. As leaders, we cast a shadow. And so here's what mistake I made. I was in my early 30s. I was a vice president of marketing in a bank. I had like 23 people reporting to me. And I was in a meeting, maybe the 2nd or 3rd month, and we were talking about customer service, and one of my colleagues raised, well, the IT people says we can't do this. And I go, those nerds in IT, they don't know anything about customer service. They just know about ones and zeros. And it was just, as you said, just kind of a flippant remark. Well, 6 weeks later, I was in one of our branches, and I overheard one of my staff members talking to the assistant branch manager and said, believe it or not, oh, don't worry about the people in IT. They're a bunch of nerds. They don't know anything about customers. And I went, oh no, this is not the message I wanted to deliver. So you're right. We have to get out of that cynical mindset, that negativity mindset, and show people the right way to do things.
And even that story you told, like, as you were saying it, I was thinking like, oh no, like which ways is this going to go wrong, right? You say this negative thing and it's like, well, are they going to hear it and will it get back to them? And in this case, it was just your bad remark, someone else reused it, but it just seems like it brings everybody down. And so when you say that we need to be better and be more positive and be more reassuring, someone might say, well, easier said than done. It might be like sort of a long process, or some hard things might need to be done. So how does, if someone says, okay, I can't change my whole workplace, I can't change everyone else instantly, but the change starts with me, especially when a leader casts a shadow. So if someone is stuck in that negative space, how do they dig themselves out of it?
It's going to be difficult. but it is a mindset change. And I think part of it is to make that conscious decision. If I was leading a team today in the workplace, and you can only control the environment. So like my 23 people, I can only control that. I can't control what my boss does. But here's how I would set the standard today coming out of the pandemic. Because one thing we learned from the pandemic is we're all human beings. We suffered collectively. We all have similar needs and desires. So my rule of thumb now would be no negative remarks on my team is acceptable about another colleague, about a customer, a vendor, consultant, anything. Now, I will be the first to admit this is a bit like world peace. We will never achieve it, but we can aim for it and we can strive for it. And then the key thing is, what do you do when somebody makes a mistake? And hey, I'd make a mistake. I'm still human. I might make an off color remark about something, or talk about the bean counters in finance or something like that. Correct it. Not acceptable. Move on. So I think that's where you have to, in this case, as a leader, understanding that leadership shadow that we just talked about, is make that conscious decision. It's no longer acceptable. I'm not going to tolerate it in others, but most importantly, I'm not going to tolerate it in myself.
I like that a lot, that it begins with making that decision. And it's also a huge goal, but how else will you get there, right? If you say, oh, well, I'll only cut out half of my negativity, then that leaves the door wide open for you to just let yourself to say like, oh, I've been good for 5 days. Now I'll be bad for 5 more days. So you set that goal of saying, well, I know I might not achieve it all the time, but if I everyone talks about like 10xing and setting a huge goal, and I'd love to take my little league team and like win every single game, and even if we only win 10% of the games, and at least we kind of set that big goal and put the work we thought we needed to do in order to get there. So set that goal for no negativity and be kind to yourself if you don't quite always get there, but it was most important to make that decision and be aware and be alert about it. And so you've had all these different lifetimes and careers, basically, right? In all these different like industries and companies, and you've had all these kind of struggles and problems, which are good because you come out of those stronger. So what has surprised you in all of your adventures that you can share with us?
In the workplace or just in life?
In the workplace, in life. I mean, what's the difference, right? In our own mental journey, it's all sort of interconnected.
Yeah, it is, I guess. I had the fortune of living in Asia for 21 years and then Australia for 13 years, all as an adult. So I've spent over half my adult life living outside the United States. And I think what has surprised me the most is that we have more in common with each other than differences. And that is something we can build upon, that we're all part of, we're all human beings. And yeah, we might have different cultures, different religions, different backgrounds, different upbringings. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. And that's part of what I'm trying to emphasize here with the Humony. And that was when I came across the idea that leadership needs to start with bringing back humanity into the workplace and bringing back humanity into leadership. By the way, the book is, and my concept of Humany is not just for the workplace. I mean, as you just said, if you're coaching a little league team, you're a leader. If you're a parent, you're a leader. If you're in your religious organization or community service, whatever, you're a leader. And so these principles will apply outside the workplace as well.
And you're making me go back in my mind to like, I think when I was like 10 years old, I joined the band. I was like 5th grade and joined the band. And the teacher, he was one of those like kind of mean leaders, but in a good way. And he said something like, well, every time you pick up your musical instrument, you're a musician. And it's kind of the same idea of like, well, what's the positive label that you can apply to yourself so that you think more of yourself, not in an arrogant way, but kind of like give yourself the confidence that you need. And you say, well, you're a leader in all these different aspects, even if you don't realize it, even if you're not yet giving yourself credit for that. So similar idea, like just what's the positive label of what I'm doing when I'm kind of stepping up and doing what needs to be done. And so what frustrates me a little bit when talking about these kind of big ideas, right? Talking about like business stuff and leadership is kind of the vagueness, right? I'm like a concrete facts, what kinds of actions that I can take. And it's good to talk about like the fluffy concepts, but when it comes to getting to the humany and having the harmony and being a good leader, what could someone do in practical terms to get started on this, to kind of start making progress?
I would say two things, Robert. One would be listening. When we talk about leaders being great communicators, we always talk about how they're great orators and get their vision across. But as a leader, you need to listen and ask good questions. But I think the second thing is, and I honestly believe the foundation of all leadership is trust. And I've coached so many leaders over the years, and I've seen so many leaders walk into a new team and say, all right, here's how you earn my trust. No, I'm sorry. What you should do is walk in and say, I trust you. Now, here's how you can lose my trust. You can lie to me. You can cover up a mistake. You can blame others. You don't come to me soon enough when you know you can't handle the problem yourself. Going back to your example earlier, that's how you can lose my trust. But you have to start with trust, and you have to, if a leader doesn't have trust, or the people don't have trust in a leader, it doesn't matter what else they do. Now, and I emphasize that because research is showing that well over 60% of the employees around the world don't trust their leaders. But guess what? Roughly about the same 60 to 70% of leaders don't trust their employees. And so we've got a big issue about trust in the workplace.
So it's a two-way street. So trust and listen. And then it also seems like you're mentioning about how just to get to problems early and to lay out the parameters, not like in a threatening way, but just to kind of, set the expectations and say, well, if there's a problem, don't let it get worse. Don't lie to me. Come to me and let's talk about it. So that way we can just kind of set the expectations early and not have to panic and revise later on. And so we've been talking about like all of your cool ideas and all the things that we should be maybe more aware of, thinking about, changing our behavior, changing our actions. Is there something that I'm not asking you? Like, you sit over there on the other side of the Zoom call thinking like, man, if only Robert asked me this question, I would have a really good answer. So is there a question here I'm not asking you?
No, you've hit the spot. I'm going to add on to something you talked earlier about when we're talking about delegating and assigning tasks. So here's another concrete thing you should change is when you assign that, also talk about when you're going to review progress. And I use those words consciously, review progress, not review status. The reason for this is if I've assigned you a project, Robert, and I can either say, okay, we're going to say you're writing a document. Well, let's review the first draft, or let's review every other Thursday at 10 o'clock. Now, this is important that you set those milestones up front, because otherwise what happens is I haven't talked to you for 7 or 8 days. My phone call ended early. I'm going to call you. Hey, Robert, how's it going on that project? And I'm going to catch you unaware. You're going to feel like I'm micromanaging you, and you're going to feel like I don't trust you. So being very specific, concrete, as you said, in how we're going to monitor progress of any work activity is really important. That's the difference between being a good leader and being a great leader.
Would it be safe to say that fight or flight mode is bad? Because even when you're saying this situation of like, you set me off on a project, it's been who knows how many weeks, I'm not even sure when we're reviewing, you call me up and I'm like, oh no, I started some and I neglected it. Now I have to like do a rush in order to get to the meeting. And it seems like very like panicky caveman mentality, fight or flight mode. And so would you say it's a good idea to try to avoid all of that?
Absolutely. And one of the things when you're leading people and you're mentoring people, one of the things you want to build, and we always talk about building their competency, building their capacity, building their skill. You want to build their confidence level. If I catch you unaware, as you just said, panic mode, what is that going to do for your self-confidence level? But by saying, hey, Robert, I'm going to call you at 10:45 on Thursday, every other Thursday, you know that, and you may put it off, but come Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning, it's like, oh my God, he's calling this week. I better do something on the project. I'm not going to, at least I'm building up your confidence as I'm doing this.
So build the confidence and think about things ahead of time. That way it's not all rushed at the end. And like our conversation, you're digging up all these childhood memories. Like one time I was in high school and I took this like really hard class where the summer before the class started, they gave us all this work and they literally gave us a calendar that said like, on July 1st, do this, on July 4th, do that, on July 5th, take a break. And there was this, it was like put in like 20 minutes a day throughout all summer. And they even included breaks and things. I remember looking at this calendar thinking like, oh, like this is too simple. Like 20 minutes a day, that's way too easy. I'll figure it out myself. And I put the whole thing aside until like a week before school began. And I looked at this calendar. I'm like, I'm going to have to put in like 12-hour days just to make it up, just because I didn't take that simple calendar seriously. I thought I was above it. And I like learned that painful lesson of just a little bit of planning ahead, a little bit of thinking things through and calmness and organization and structure that can really make things stupidly simple. There's probably a better way of saying that, but just like, you look at, 20 minutes a day, that's too easy. It could have been if only I'd kind of followed the system and done those sorts of things that I was supposed to do. So you're drudging up all these kind of painful lessons that I've learned, but the point of you being here and having this conversation and the point of you having your programs in your books is that, I'm sure we all have these painful lessons ahead of us, but maybe we can avoid some of them and make room for more helpful, painful lessons. I'm not sure. And so if someone is really amazed and intrigued by what you share with us today, how do they know if they're a good fit for what you have to offer? And what are your books and websites and programs about?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I just send me an email. Let's have a conversation. I mean, it's Stephen at humonyleadership.com. Humony, as you said, I created the word. It's HUMONY, leadership.com. All the books are on Amazon. Paperback, Kindle, and now 2 of them are in audiobook. So if you're an audiobook fan, this book, Humany Leadership's an audiobook, and the previous book called Better Decisions, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes is now an audiobook. So yeah, but just reach out to me. I have to have a 20-minute conversation with anybody, whether you want a keynote speaker or you just want to talk about how can you bring the Humany concepts into your team, whether it's a 3-person team, a 23-person team, or a 300-person department. Happy to talk with you.
Fantastic. Stephen at humanyleadership.com. That way you can have that conversation about bringing this Humany leadership concept into your organization. And you can check out his books and search Amazon and Audible, all those places. And, as we wind down our conversation here, Stephen, something I really enjoy doing, it might be kind of like a sick satisfaction, is putting my guest on the spot and asking about, is there a really profound, important quote or lesson that you've learned over the years? And even failing that, is there some advice maybe that you wish you'd gotten 20 years ago? And this is the thing where I always put someone on the spot, but it's always a good answer. So what advice do you wish you'd gotten 20 years ago? Or what's a profound, helpful quote or lesson you can share?
I think I wish I'd had the advice in my early years, but the best advice I can give anybody today is communicating as a leader is critical. You cannot over communicate clarity, and frequencies are critical. You can't just say something once, like, "Hey, here's our goal," or "Hey, here's what we're going to work on," or "Here's what I want you to do." And you're going to learn this as a parent, Robert. You're going to end up telling your son many, many times to make his bed or to clean his room or something to get through to him. But you need to communicate clarity of expectations, particularly the expectations of behaviors and standards that you want to see on your team. And it's that communication that will make a difference.
Communicate the expectations of behaviors and standards, clarity, repetition, frequency. Awesome. I love it. And so the next step for you podcast listeners out there is send that quick email, Stephen at humanyleadership.com, and tell Stephen what you think. If you want to find out about the links to his websites, or, so there's a lost art these days of just telling someone, "Hey, I wanted to reach out. You did a great job." So email Stephen over there at Stephen at humanyleadership.com. And thank you very much, Stephen, for sharing with us this advice and this new word you've created, and just these concepts that we really need to be thinking about and focusing, paying attention to, implementing, because there's all these old ways of thinking that are very 1980s, but we need to be focusing on the modern day. So I appreciate your very generous and helpful advice, and I appreciate you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for bringing up some old childhood memories for me as well. And lastly, enjoy parenthood.